This piece is the fourth in the Fullness of Time series, which are all hand-stitched pieces. And I called it that because a lot of the cloth I use is antique French hemp or linen, so it's full of time. And the hand stitching also takes a long time. So it's doubly full of time, you might say. I love the meditative quality of hand stitching. I love feeling the fabric under my fingers. I like thinking about the history of the cloth. I like running my hand over the texture of the stitches. It just takes me to an incredibly peaceful place at the end of the day. The way I stitch is simple. I like things in a row. I like the repetitive mark. I'm not an embroiderer, I'm a stitcher, and I think there's a world of difference between those two things. So in terms of how I stitch, I want the viewer to have a meditative experience when they look at the work and kind of lose themselves in it, in the same way that I had that kind of experience while I was stitching it. It's as simple as that. And if I try and do complicated stitches, my mind doesn't go to that restful place. It's as simple as that. So a lot of the actual stitches are about what pleases me and the simplicity and elegance of the final look of the piece. Inspirations for In the Fullness of Time, I think, came from other artists such as Agnes Martin. Very quiet, reductive works. Rebecca Salter would be another one. She works a lot with monochrome. Very, very simple marks, repetitive marks on the canvas. And so, again, yes, there's inspiration there in terms of particular artists, but in the way, the real inspiration is about the act of hand stitching, the act of meditation. I got into hand stitching because I went on a 4-week detox in India where we weren't allowed to read, we weren't allowed to watch television, we weren't really allowed anything that sort of activated our minds. It was all about going inside. And I thought, well, I'm going to go crazy, particularly as I can't smoke either. So I layered up a couple of pieces of linen, quite large, 1.5 meters, and grey, of course. Took some hemp thread with me, and I would spend 5 to 6 hours every day hand stitching for 28 days. So the very first piece in this body of work is called 28 Days because fundamentally that's how long it took me to stitch it. So the larger works take time, obviously a lot more time than the smaller works, but that's good too. I can't physically dye with natural dyes, which is how this has been dyed, a piece of cloth this large myself. So when I want to work this big, I source my cloth from Polylister down in Gloucester, who collects old hemp, dyes it with natural dyes, in this case indigo with a tiny drop of weld in it to give it a slight green undertone. And I will buy these pieces from Poly before I hand stitch them. And when I started this one, the join mark, I just wanted to do something with it. And so I actually started this one with the pink lines, and its working title originally was scar tissue because it reminded me of 2 pieces of skin being brought together and stitched together. I wasn't quite sure whether people would respond to the scar tissue idea, so I kind of left that behind, but that's how it started.